what I was hoping, and that the residential area would maintain where it is. And yes, there are two businesses up Van Buren. One of them has been there a very long time, and the other one, I'm not even sure if it's still operating. I never see anybody there. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
I believe Director Wright has a question for
Well,
you.
she kind of answered it. I was going to ask her, how did she feel about the other businesses, the antique shop? I visited a couple of those places. I think that Patty Wax, and then you go on down and on to the left. And
Yeah, that's south of B Street, and those were there when I was looking at moving there, and so I was aware of those, and I just thought, that's part of, that area, and it's very, very close to Markham. So that didn't bother me because it was already there. The antique shop, I consider that to not be inappropriate for Hillcrest, plus it's been there for a long time. The other business,
got a restaurant in there somewhere too?
no. The other business, I don't even know what it is, and I, for one, don't like the orange awning, but did that answer your question?
Thank you.
Anybody else?
All right, our next card, speaking for, is from Daphne Puckett. Puckett, if you would, identify yourself and where you live, please.
Hi, I'm Daphne Puckett, and I live on 5101C, which is the house. I actually own the house. I've lived there for 3 years, and it is directly in between Kimmy's and West, the building, or the business in front of it. And actually, since she got there, the house that she is in right now was abandoned for 3 years before now. And in that amount of time, the alley, which my alley is more affected by the parking than anybody else's. My house is, like I said, it's right exactly across the alley from hers. My car was broken into 3 times within the last 2.5 years in that alleyway. Since she has moved in, she has actually cleaned up a lot of nasty debris and, what everybody is talking about, looking out onto a parking lot now. What you were looking out on was pretty bad. I mean, it was, it was ugly. It's really been cleaned up a lot. And she's got motion lights and things hooked up, and I'm actually benefiting from, the occasional person being active back there, because I think it actually helps with the crime. And as far as the flow of traffic goes, there is usually one car there besides her own, and that's maybe every 1 or 2 hours. I'm likely to have that many visitors come by, I mean, there really are not, it's not a lot of cars. So there's not a big traffic thing. Like with the antique shop and a few of the others, people are free to come and go as they want, There's no telling how many cars might be there at one given time. Well, with this, she knows exactly who's going to be there and when. And I've been really attentive of this, with it being in my backyard. Since the last time it was addressed, I've been paying really close attention to it. And I don't see anything bad coming out of it. I really don't. She has a great clientele. Everybody is really sweet. I think it's attractive. It's a social thing. I don't mind having a little nail shop in my backyard. As a matter of fact, I think it's attractive and cute, And as far as the crime goes, I don't see how it could make crime worse. I think, if anything, it has actually improved that. And like I said, the house itself definitely looks much better.
Thank you very much. Let me mention my next card to speak, actually to just register being against it, Mr. Mark Robinette. You want to raise your hand, Mr. Robinette? Oh, okay, he wished to register his objection. Speaking against the item, Brian Germany.
Good evening, Mayor Stodola, directors. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you this evening. I'm that no-good neighbor that doesn't want to look at what is not really a parking lot at the moment, but lots of dirt pushed into the backyard.
Where do you live, Mr. Germany?
I live at 5112 B Street, and her backyard abuts the last one-third of my backyard, adjacent to the big yellow gingerbread house with the red barn at 300 North Van Buren. I think that we should keep the zoning, the commercial zoning south of B Street. I bought that house about 15 years ago after previously living on North Pierce in the Heights. I've been a resident in the area for about 20 years. I welcomed the rehabilitation of the Markham House Suites Hotel. I welcomed the eye surgery center at the corner of A Street and Van Buren, because those were truly dilapidated crack houses there that were bulldozed. There was an elderly gentleman who was an aircraft mechanic for the Royal Air Force back post-World War II, who owned that little two-story house, who built a bomb shelter in the backyard, who collected nuts and bolts and pieces of tin. And frankly, yes, he filled them up in these little sheds, and he let the backyard grow crazy. His wife passed away about 4 years ago, he passed away about 3 years ago, so it did go untended by the family. So in that respect, Kimmy's done a fine job of cleaning the place up, but I question her business acumen in purchasing a place to run as a business without having secured the zoning. I would have thought Mr. Noswanger would have, done a better job of advising her on that in the beginning. Let's don't make the neighborhood pay at this point. Staff has recommended that this zoning be denied. The neighbors concur. At the end of the day, it's about planning, and it's about zoning, and it's about spot zoning. And very clearly, this is spot zoning, and we would appreciate your voting against this. Are there any questions from the directors?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am,
Could you clarify? Yes.
Sorry, Director Hendricks. I try to recognize people in order, and Director Wright has hit me hard
Okay.
here on the left,
Oh, yeah.
and you'll be next.
I don't want you bruised. Go on.
do you not consider the other zoning in that area to be spot zoning, sir?
Actually, the property that is now West Design was originally, I think, a Remax real estate office when I bought that house in 1994 or 3, I believe, and then it became River Rock, and it was a management office that ran several restaurants in the area.
That's why I thought there was a restaurant there.
Yeah, well, it was River Rock Management Company. They never had customers. And now it's West Design, and they really don't have customers dropping in. They actually have a little van, and they go out and they do all that foo-foo fancy stuff to houses that rich people, pay for. And then further up
The
the block.
spot zoning, though.
Well, no, actually, I think it's grandfathered in for like 50 years.
Non-conforming use.
The same as the little 50, and the Patty Wax is actually at Markham and Van Buren, which, if you can find it next door to, the Exxon station and all the hullabaloo with ball games down there, I mean, that's where all that commotion belongs. The neighbors feel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Speaking for
My
Elizabeth.
question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Director Hendricks has a question for you.
Yes, Director Hendricks.
You would really have to explain to me, what did you mean by her coming in there with, the neighbors would have to pay for it? What do you mean by that?
The neighbors would have to pay for it.
Yeah, that's what you just said.
What statement did I make?
Yes.
The neighbors would have to pay for it in terms of the commotion. Now, it's been presented that there's one customer per hour. Actually, I've seen maybe as few as her car and maybe one other car, or I've seen 4 and 5 other cars. Now, the payment that I'm talking about is the devaluation of the property, because there is a commercial business visible through the dining room window of the big yellow house, which is...
Do you have figures that would tell you that her business would depreciate your property?
It
I'm a real
depends on how it's
estate
run. Now, I question the enforcement ability of the city to enforce after hours, because another neighbor has complained about after-hours activities with the appearance of a business being conducted right now in violation of the lack of zoning, and they were told that no one was available, just as there's no one typically available to pick up a dog except in an emergency. There's no one available to go knock on the door and say, "Excuse me, are you doing hair and nails?"
I'm talking about depreciation.
I'm sure there's quite the potential. I feel that there is a potential, or there's the potential that if she becomes zoned, Mark Abernathy will buy that yellow house and put a restaurant and a bar and grill there, or somebody across the street might want to do the same thing. So once you allow that encroachment through spot zoning, you open the Pandora's box of that entire corridor right up to Mount St. Mary's becoming a commercial zone.
Let me suggest what did happen in 1957. If you have a problem, then most people will move. That's just a suggestion.
If you saw the people that I associate with, if you knew the people I associate with that I count among my friends, we celebrate diversity in Hillcrest, and I will stand for anyone's right to have the privilege of living in that neighborhood and be my neighbor. And if you zone, Kimmy, that's fine. I have to look at that backyard. I want to know how high the fence might be.
You answered my question. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you very much, Director Hendricks. Are there any other questions?
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
This term spot zoning has been thrown around, and I'm a little concerned about that because spot zoning is not proper, but this is not spot zoning, it's a plan development. And by definition, a plan development is something that can be put into an area that wouldn't be zoned that way as a matter of right with appropriate safeguards to be compatible with the area. So it is not spot zoning.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. If we could, speaking for Elizabeth Clark. If you would wait for 1 minute, Ms. Clark. Director Wright has a
Mr.
question.
Carpenter, your explanation of spot zoning is appreciated. So if this is not spot zoning, and her attorney have said that they've addressed all of the planning commissions, all the planning department's concerns, so in other words, this could be considered appropriate as far as them having addressed those needs.
Right. The policy question for the board is whether to approve it. It is not illegal.
Okay, Ms. Clark, go ahead, please. If you would identify yourself and where you live.
Okay, I'm Elizabeth Clark, and I live at 5310 C Street, and I operate a business on Markham. I've known Kimmy for approximately 23 years, give or take 6 months, and the last decade I've known her as a business owner. Most of that time she worked at Markham, and she had a secluded parking in the back there, and made sure that she had lighting, and that if it was just her and another customer, she would walk them out, and she never had a problem there. Since she has moved to that house, I actually noticed that there was a house there. I couldn't even see a house before that. She's cleaned up the backyard. I have not, as I've driven by, noticed a lot of cars. I don't typically get my nails done, but I do live in that area and drive by quite a bit. There is lighting where there wasn't lighting before, and I'm not really sure where the concern comes from that this would make a big impact on the area, because unless you know it's there, you would never know it was a business. I think even if she put up a little cottage sign, you would never know, because it's still a house, it's still decorated as a house, the landscaping is still as a house. You really would never know.
Thank you very much. Next card to speak against, Marcia Camp. Oh, I've got 2 cards from you. Thank you. Next card is from Mysterio Lingo. Speak against.
My name's Sterling Lango. I live at 5301 B Street. Most of the things I've got to say has already been said. The only thing that I would like to know now is the city attorney said something about if this is approved, that is not spot zoning. Okay, then what I'd like to know is why the zoning commission, who denied it, has said that that spot zoning is one of the things that would, if it was approved, that spot zoning would be that would be spot zoning.
Spot zoning is a legal phrase and has a specific meaning. If the planning commission doesn't like the concept because of several reasons, traffic, what it does in the area, whether it can be harmonious, that can be their concern or the reason, and I don't really know what each of the members thought. All I'm saying is that if the board wants to approve this, it's not illegal. If the board wants to disapprove this, it's not illegal.
Okay. Well, I sit on my porch and I could look right across at the property that was that we're talking about. And my concern is that she says that she's an operator and 2 part-times. If this is approved, then who is to say and who will control how many operators that she will bring in? How many cars that will be coming in there, at the same time? Because if she gets us approved on 1 operator and 2 part-times, then what's to stop her? Because right now, the reason I say I look across at it is I see numerous cars there. You know, at night and in the daytime, and I'm not standing there watching her just for the heck of it, because I, you know, that I am not for having a business established in a block that has no businesses. And that's about all I got to say.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lingo. Yes, Director Hurst has a question.
Mayor, I guess this question would be for Mr. Bazinski. Is it written into the ordinance that she can have 2 part-time employees?
Vice Mayor, as was stated, the application was amended for 1 full-time and 2 part-time. The ordinance has a section in it that makes reference to the action that was taken at the Planning Commission meeting to amend the application.
Does it say hours in the application? Part-time hours?
I think the hours,
I know, but does it quantify what part-time means?
I don't think no, I'm not sure. I don't think it does, Vice Mayor.
It doesn't. And what parking is, if we have a parking lot, what parking is required for this sort of business? How many parking spaces?
Typically, for a personal service operation such as this, I need to get the ordinance. I can tell you what office and commercial is. I think this is 1 to 200, 1 space per 200 square feet, but let me check that.
Okay. Could you also tell me what signage is allowed?
All right, while he's looking that up, we'll go to our next cards. For the applicant, Becky Whelan.
Hi, I'm Becky Whalen, and I'm a client of Kimmy's and a friend. I was at the last board meeting, and a lot of the things that were presented, a lot of the men that were there heard beauty shop, and this is not a conventional beauty shop. You look at it, it's a cute little cottage. It's a house. Kimmy never had a big sign before. She's made concessions on this. She had cute little awnings at her other place. I mean, it is an attribute to the area. And I had talked to one of the other board members and asked him if he had been by, had even seen it. He went, no. And he said he was going to go by. He never did. And I just, talking to her neighbor and other people, it is an attribute. I feel like it is the right thing. I mean, that property looked like crap. And the whole reason that we and Kimmy is coming before this board is if everything was just cut and dry, then no, there'd be no businesses there. But she is wanting to do a good thing. There are limitations, strict limitations, and there is no one ever there when I'm there, and I'm there at 10 o'clock every other Wednesday. So, I mean, I'm just telling you, and I think maybe the women who do get their nails done understand that you don't have 15 people in there when you're doing it. There's one person. And the people that do hair for her are not the main support of that business. Thank you.
Mayor, I have a question. Could you please tell me where you live?
I live in Leawood, very close to Rodney Parham, right off 1 street off of Rodney Parham, which has a lot of business.
Said the people that does hair for her, so there is hair done?
There are 2 part-time employees that I've seen maybe in there 4 or 5 times in the last 5 years.
They do hair.
They do hair.
Okay, thank you.
Kimmy does not do hair.
Thank you very much. Paula Lingo, do you have anything new to add to this dialogue? Okay, good.
I live at 5021 B Street with Mr. Lingo, and we've lived there about 10 years. And this is our retirement home. Mr. Lingo would like to see this board break into the zoning of a block that doesn't have any grandfathered business or commercial at all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lingo. Okay, I have one other card speaking for, Carolyn Johnson.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Johnson. I actually live in Leawood, but I did live in Hillcrest and still own my house on C Street. I'm not very good at doing this. This is how important this is to me for Kimmy. I've been a client of hers for about 5 years, and I pretty much would have the same thing to say, that it's a quiet business, not many cars there. There's usually maybe one other person. I'll get there a little early, and she's still there. But, excuse me. Anyway, Hillcrest is one of my favorite parts of this city. And my little house there on C Street it's so charming. The neighborhood is very charming, and I would not advocate anything that I felt like would be detrimental to that area. And like several of them have said, she's made a lot of improvements and probably is going to be a positive influence. All I have to say.
Thank you very much, Ms. Johnson.
Mayor, I want to...
Director Hendricks has a question.
It's really not a question. I just want to allay your fears. I've heard several times the question was asked, where do you live? You know, I live downtown, but I shop out on Shackleford.
Right.
That's my comment. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, Mayor, where did you say you lived? I'm sorry. Leawood, but you own property that you rent out?
I rent it out now. It was my personal residence.
I understand. Thank you.
Marriage will do that. It'll get you moved. Okay, we have some other cards against Cynthia Collada.
And I live at 50 Kim Latta, Latta, Latta. It doesn't.
I'm Ruth Bell with the League of Women Voters, and Mayor, you asked my first question when you asked about whether the applicant was going to live in the house or not, because that's what's unclear at the Planning Commission level. From the League's point of view, this is a planning issue. And as you have heard, people make major financial decisions on the basis of planning, and with the expectation that the planning, especially in an established neighborhood like this, will be fairly consistent over a fairly long period of time. The intrusion of a commercial business in the middle of a residential section of that street does not only make it more difficult or challenging or perhaps interesting for the people who live there, but it also means that the city is not being consistent and perhaps, in our opinion, upholding the city's responsibility to support zoning in an area, because citizens make so many decisions based on the existing zoning. And our position is that exceptions should not be made to existing zoning unless a clear and compelling reason exists. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. I have one final card against Scott Smith. Smith, if you would identify yourself and who you represent.
Indeed. Mayor Stodola, Vice Mayor Hurst, Board of Directors. I'm Scott Smith. I'm the president of the Hillcrest Residents Association. At our November meeting, this came before us, and it was a unanimous agreement to oppose the change to the land use. It really is a change in the fabric of houses and commercial. And once one house goes down, it might not seem significant, but it triggers the next one, which then triggers the next one. So I would ask that you follow your staff's recommendations, your planning commission, the Hillcrest Residents Association, and deny this change in plan. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the last card that I have. I'm going to go ahead and, if there's no further public comment, come forward, please, Mr. Niswanger.
I'm speaking on behalf of Ms. Kimmy. There are several things said that we absolutely dispute, and if y'all would give me a couple of minutes, I see you already are. Let me address them. People are saying spot zoning, planning issue. Let's look at the big
I think
picture.
we understand the distinctions there. I don't think we need to go back over that. We understand that it's going to be a permissible use if the board decides to vote for it.
Is it an existing permitted use already? Well, that's on an appeal. We disagree with Mr. Bazinski. The law allows you to operate out of your house and also conduct the business of doing artwork, teaching music, and you can have up to 2 students at a time. Okay, Mr. Bazinski wants to call this a beauty salon. It is not. You think about a grocery store, they sell bread, they sell produce, they sell milk, they sell beer and wine. If I only sell beer and wine, am I still a grocery store? That's what Mr. Bazinski is arguing. We do not.
Let me ask a question, Steve. Are the 2 part-timers doing hair? Yes or no?
I'm not positive. They were at the old location. I don't know that they're doing hair now. And I want to address some of these really ugly comments being made over here.
We've been dealing with this for a long period of time. I think the board has a good sense of this issue, but I want to ask that question. Are the 2 part-timers going to be doing hairstyling?
Actually, I only have one hairdresser and myself.
So, Kimmy, you're going to be doing some hairstyling as well?
No, I do manicures and pedicures only.
Okay.
And I'm full-time, and I have clients that I do on the hour, like they said. And as far as the parking in the back, when I was on Markham, it was more crime on Markham, and I had a parking lot in the back, and I had never had any crime.
Okay, but to answer my question then, so you have one
hairdresser.
person part-time that's going to be a
Actually, he works
hairdresser.
a part-time
And your
job.
application requests 2 part-timers. Would that second part-timer you anticipate be doing hairstyling as well?
If I can get someone else in there, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. So Mr. Niswanger, I'm not going to get into what is a beauty salon or what's not a beauty salon. I think the issue is that they're going to be doing nails and they're going to be doing some hairstyling, right?
Yes,
Is that
sir.
fair?
That's fair.
Okay. Now, what other issues did you want to address?
Something that's really interesting is how, let me just put this, Miss Kimmy's already living there. There's no question she's going to continue living there. At the meeting at the Planning Commission, she got upset because there were some comments made that she was going to increase crime by being there. That hurt her feelings. That's a racial stereotype. And so she got up and she said, maybe I won't live there. And that was a misstatement on her part. Her application, as written and as amended, stands. She still lives there now.
Well, let me ask this question. If you get this rezoned, do you plan to live there? Are you going to be living there and doing this work or not?
When I was on Markham, I did not live inside my business. But I would like to eventually add something on to that property because the property is big enough to add like an apartment on the side of that. Because really, legally, you're not supposed to live inside of a business if you're running a nail business, a hair business, but you can add on to it.
Is that by virtue of your licensing?
Right.
Okay, so there's a state licensing statute that prohibits you from living in the home where you would do this particular type of work.
But in actuality, I could live there because there's a part on the back of the house that is separated from where I would be doing business upstairs. That's detached, that has a garage, actually can be a garage apartment.
Mayor, I want to ask a direct question because I've gotten lost in her answer.
All right, go ahead.
I want to make certain
Go ahead,
I
Director King.
understand. Kimmy, if this is, you live in this house now, will you continue to live in this house?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I also want to make a statement too. And I just can't believe some of these people that live in the Hillcrest area. I've been in this area 15 years. And since I've moved to 310 Van Buren, you should see some of the things that has happened to me. I mean, you're supposed to get welcome packages when you move in these areas. I haven't gotten not one. You know, it's just all negativity, you know. They don't, you know, they just, like he said, he does watch me. And as far as the phone calls, they have stopped. I was receiving threatening phone calls. They have stopped. And I will hope they will stop. But I do love this area, and I would love to stay in this area.
I'm still confused from what Mr. Keck asked. Is this a two-story house? Did I hear you say something about upstairs?
It has a garage apartment on the back of it. It's attached.
So this is a house with an attached garage?
Actually, the laundry room separates it. It's upstairs, and actually it's on the back side of it.
We could draw a picture if that would be helpful.
Actually, you got a picture.
I don't know that that's necessary. I mean, if I understand, have you gotten a license? I mean, is this have you gotten a license, or is there a requirement to get a state license to determine whether or not you can occupy a portion of this premises and still do this type of work?
I believe what Kimmy just explained, and Kimmy, correct me if I'm wrong, is that if she lives above the apartment, since above the garage, she can comply with the state licensing requirements for doing nails and toenails and hair.
And so how large is this house that's not going to be used for a home?
Well, okay, how large is
You're talking about a garage and living upstairs from the garage.
The dimensions of the existing structure are in the plan, and we've got an architect here. But my understanding, our engineer architect here, who can probably answer these questions better than me, but there is a garage, and above that garage is an apartment, a small one, that Kimmy can live out of without violating the state licensure laws.
Well, I understand. So, I mean, what's in the garage then? What's underneath in the garage? Nothing.
Storage.
All right.
And again, I am not the brightest bulb in the lamp. But usually whenever I ask a question, if somebody's living there now, the answer yes or no pretty well clears it up. I've heard yes, she will live there. I've heard no, she can't live there in the same place because because of licensure requirements. I've heard yes, I'm going to live there in a garage above, in an apartment above the garage. Do you live in the house now? First part. Secondly, will you continue to live in this house if this goes forward?
Yes.
Thank you.
I think Director Keck is confusing me. Do you live in the house or do you live in the garage apartment?
The garage apartment.
So you do not live in the house where the business is located?
No. It's separated. You just have to see it. It's only actually, the house is only 1038 square feet. So they added the garage onto that, to the back of that. Actually, it's not too many houses in that area that has garages. So actually, I can make that into a garage apartment. But upstairs, it has a room, a shower, and a bathroom.
That's all that's up there?
Mm-hmm.
And that's all you live in is one room and a...
That's all I need. It's just myself. I have no kids.
You live in just one room and a bathroom upstairs?
That's all I need.
Thank you.
But now, wait a minute. I mean, this is the same sort of line of
Well,
questions.
let's not get into an argument about this. I think we've heard enough. Is there any new issues you wish to bring up, Mr. Niswanger, that were raised? I mean,
I own a business and I own the building, and I'm in it after hours sometimes because I got work to do, and that doesn't mean I'm violating any laws. I mean, she's going to be able to access her building while she's living in it, but that doesn't mean she's going to violate any laws.
Can I say something?
I don't think anyone suggested that she was violating any laws there. We're just trying to clear up the issue of whether you're living in a house, living in a garage, living in the upstairs apartment of the garage, okay? Thank you.
Can I say something? A lot of neighbors are concerned about a lot of cars coming over there.